Obviously, I want to start with the budget. Back channel types of reports, people I'm talking to who are communicating with lawmakers are telling me that as far as the start this year, that you guys are all off to a better start from a tone perspective than last year. But of course, still some major differences. How would you describe and characterize what's happening right now?
I first of all agree with you. The tone seems to me to be very different from last year. We are and have been engaged in conversations for some time now, and I think there is a real interest in getting this done. I don't think anybody wants to have the kind of impasse we had last year. So I'm optimistic that we can come up with something. As you pointed out, there are differences and disagreements. That's the way democracy is supposed to work. But we're having conversations about those disagreements, and I believe we can get to a resolution.
Are you personally involved yet? I know tradition dictates that the staffs talk first, but tradition was kind of thrown out the window last year. So are you personally involved yet at this point?
Oh, yeah. And I was involved throughout last year. Yeah, the staff plays a very important role, but I think, especially given the party divide right now, it's important that I be involved as well. So I am.
Now, the counties and the schools are all but begging both sides to please get this done on time this year. I realize that you can't predict the future, but what can you tell them about the chances that there will not be a repeat of what happened last year?
Well, there are two sides to this, so I can only say I'm working hard to make sure we don't have a delay. But again, the schools face a perennial problem with the budget because their budgeting process tends to go on in the early part of the calendar year, whereas the state budget is due on June 30th when it's on time. So even when it's on time, the school districts are still somewhat up in the air in terms of how the assumptions they have to make on their budget. So I think we need to look for things that we could do to make their jobs easier beyond just getting a budget done on time.
Now, as I mentioned, it's been a couple months since you've been here, so we've really, I think, only had one show since the budget address. And the budget address wasn't so much about the budget you're proposing as it was about the whole situation that we were still in at that time. So I'd like to give you a chance to remind everybody, perhaps in bullet point form, if you like, what are the major initiatives, what are the major points that you're pushing for from your side in this budget round?
Well, the budget address was about having a budget that is actually in balance. So fiscal discipline is really important. And I recognize that's a revenue and an expenditure side. We need to address both responsibly and in reality. Education is a key thing. There are very few things we ought to ask of a state government. We believe in limited government in the United States. That's the way it should be. We have a free market economic system. That's the way it should be. And government should be a facilitator. At the state level, there are very few things that we ought to do. We ought to do them well. We ought to focus on our investment in education. That's one of the things that we have at the state level. And Pennsylvania is 45th in the country in terms of its support for public education, its percentage support, which means that the local school districts have to foot a bigger share of the bill than most other states in the country. We need to change that. We need to get to the point where Pennsylvania, the state, plays its fair share, its proper role in supporting education. I think the infrastructure investments we need to make. Act 89, the year before I came into, 2 years before I came into office, I think started us on the road to a responsible approach. We can still do more there. And I think the social safety net, we need to do at the state level what we can to complement what the federal government is doing. That's why I expanded Medicaid. One of the first things I did when I came to office. We now have 625,000 Pennsylvanians who have health insurance who didn't have it before I became governor, and we need to keep on working on that. And then finally, and I'll talk a little bit about this, I hope, later in the show. The opioid crisis.
Yeah.
We lose a lot of people. People die in Pennsylvania from drug overdose, and that's an epidemic. And I think there's real bipartisan support for doing something about that. And I propose putting some additional money into the efforts to hopefully eliminate drug overdose scourge that's affecting Pennsylvania.